Before we start, I want you to think of that leader or that manager, the one that you know could clear an entire room with just a look. The manager that really made you have to sit down and rehearse tons and tons of times an email just to ask for some time off. Or you're going around the office and you're asking coworkers, is this the right time for me to actually share an idea? Because you're trying to establish the room. Now, then imagine finding out that while you were walking on eggshells around them, they were probably going to their boss and saying, oh, my team has no problems. We're doing great. The problem is that leaders are actually taught to prioritize driving results more than those who actually get them there. And we need to stop believing that silence from teams actually means that there aren't any issues and start treating silence as the most important thing to pay attention to. Over the past decade, I've helped mid-level leaders build loyal, high-performing teams, and the work is rooted a lot in my own lived experience. So I know what it's like to feel like you have to tread lightly before speaking up to a manager or even a senior leader, and before offering any input or challenging the status quo. I'd quietly really just check in with my colleagues and gauge leadership's mood and openness. And then when we had our performance reviews or had to fill out the engagement surveys, I would arrive to those questions that were directed to my manager or my leadership team. And what I wrote was honestly never what I truly wanted to say. Silence is the most important thing to pay attention to. And it actually turns out that what I experienced wasn't even just my story. It has a name. And I realized that researchers have been studying this for decades. Morrison and Milliken's seminal work on organizational silence demonstrates that employees often withhold concerns because they actually see speaking up as dangerous or futile, not because there aren't any issues or that they don't exist. And that silence does become a systemic barrier to change and development in complex pluralistic organizations. And then we have Amy Edmondson's research on psychological safety, which similarly finds that in low safety teams, people engage in impression management. They're protecting their image rather than sharing that bad news or dissent. And that actually creates a false sense of consensus that allows flawed plans or risks and inequities to persist, especially unchecked. So silence, it isn't just the absence of voice. It's an active behavior that is tied to three things: burnout, turnover, and disengagement. So when leaders are misreading silence as alignment, they aren't just missing that problem, they're also helping to create it. And right now, there are too many leaders that are mistaking a quiet room for a healthy team, especially in hybrid and remote workplaces. That confusion has never been more dangerous. Silence often means that people feel unsafe or unseen, or they're certain that their voice isn't going to change anything, so why say something? Not that everything is fine. Silence is still the most important thing to pay attention to. Now, as a queer Black woman, I've had my share of having a strong urge to just hold back when it came to speaking my mind. And a lot of this was really in fear of being seen as the angry Black woman. And early in my career, when you're super overly confident and you think you know everything, I honestly had an opinion on everything. I was always empowered to speak my mind, but I really had a huge awakening when I tried to actually speak up during a meeting with clients, which also included my manager. And you might see where this is going, so buckle up. I was a couple of months into my role, and I was so excited about it. I was a new HR associate at a mid-sized tech company. I was sitting in a meeting with my manager, a few of our clients, and their team. We were all wanting to work together to start strategizing ways that we can improve how we implement this new human resources information system, or HRIS. My manager actually suggested that we start by gathering the head of product's perspective, and then we can just use that and share that as part of the implementation plan with those who are going to be using this HRIS. Well, I stepped in and I said, if I may, I think perhaps we start with taking time to speak with each country leader, getting their specific needs so that we are ensuring everything is encompassed in this HRIS. My manager not only dismissed my idea, but then also spoke to me after that meeting, demanding that I get approval before sharing any ideas in any future meetings. As you can imagine, my confidence was crushed after that moment. And so I stopped speaking up in meetings, sharing ideas, because they were constantly not approved. And so I would just take notes and go along with whatever was recommended, even if I disagreed. Then I noticed that others on the team were actually doing the same. They weren't speaking up either. They shared similar sentiments for why they even stopped speaking up too. And then we would watch as our manager would go to leadership and say that the team was doing so great and that no news means really good news. But what they didn't realize, though, is that there were significant ramifications that came afterwards. I felt like my entire career was over. And then Jordan came in, and everything changed. Jordan was my life coach, honestly helping me to rebuild my power and my confidence, both personally and professionally, because they were very much intertwined. And it hit me. Jordan really asked me to share that moment where I first realized I had lost my confidence. And I, of course, shared the encounter that I had with my manager. But then she asked a question that opened up an entirely new world. What do you wish your manager had done differently that would have had a positive impact on you and your team's confidence? And I thought about this and I said, well, I would start by just explaining the impact of silence on our team early on, and how we can just best work together. Because I really think bringing that awareness to my manager could have saved the team from losing more than 50% of our colleagues. And then I looked at Jordan as if a light bulb in my mind just illuminated the entire space, and it hit me. I wonder how many teams this happens to, and how many managers are actually unaware of these ramifications. And so after several sessions, many sessions, I made it my mission to work with leaders to make them aware that silence from their teams does not mean that there aren't any issues, and to start treating silence as the most important thing to pay attention to. Silence is the most important thing to pay attention to. And so, how do we do that? We practice inclusive leadership every single day. And that can happen in ways of building real speak up channels and not just relying so much on just surveys. We need to have people feel that they can have their voices rewarded, and also that they can be protected for being a risk taker. So also do that. And one thing that you can actually try tomorrow in a team meeting or any next meeting that you have is ask one question. What is one risk or concern that we're actually not talking about? Then stay quiet all the way through the awkward pause. And it's gonna be awkward. But when somebody does actually speak, thank them by their name and reflect what you actually heard. And then name one concrete next step based on their input, so your team starts to learn that speaking up creates impact, not risk. That silence, the one right after your question, is where leadership really happens. That silence is the most important thing to pay attention to. Now, what if your legacy as a leader isn't about the goals that you hit, but it's more about the truths that your team never felt safe to say out loud? And years from now, when your team is telling stories of what it was like to work with you, will they remember you as that person they went silent around to survive? Or the one who actually made it impossible to stay silent about what really mattered? Thank you, everybody.